Hey everybody, I'm back with 75 unique submitted from the community. I'm going to be trying to rate them all in under 30 minutes. It's going to be a little bit of a sprint. As a reminder, I'm going to be rating them between F for unplayable to S best possible. Most of them are going to fall around that rare power level. They have to be a little bit better than rare cards to get a B, and significantly better to get an A or an S. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe to my channel, and comment. The altered scene's growing pretty slowly, so I definitely appreciate any support I can get. And with that, let's jump into the first card. First card's a Shenlong. I feel like this is better than a rare from hand, but worse from reserve. Guess in the middle, we'll give it a C. Another Shenlong here. Honestly, this doesn't seem too crazy on paper, but it would fit so good in Detsadi. I feel like I almost have to give this a C+. Here's a Kraken. Yeah, just 6 water for hand. This is pretty underwhelming, and the extra effect doesn't do anything for it. We're going to give this an F. Keelan Elemental, I mean, it's blatantly better than the rare from hand, and I feel like the effect that you gain for 1 mana is pretty strong from the reserve. Yeah, I think this is a little better than a normal rare. Looking at this as Modius, you only get the effect from hand. I think that's a little bit underwhelming, and honestly, I usually want this for the anchor, not the boost. Just going to give this a D+. This Loki here can refill your hand, which could be pretty strong in certain decks, but it doesn't discard the reserve, so I think that this could be pretty good with the lower hand cost of 6, but nothing crazy. I don't like paying 1 more for a draw on a card that's basically a common. Yeah, I still feel like I wouldn't play this in anything. Daughter of Yggdrasil, this one's actually pretty crazy, but it has a pretty big downside to pretty much even things out. I still feel like, though, that the benefits you're getting make it a little bit better than a rare. I mean, the extra token you're going to get off of this one basically cancels out with the extra mana you have to play from reserve. It's not doing anything impressive. Yeah, this is probably like a bad common almost, or just a common. Frog Prince here, it's just the rare from hand. From the reserve, it's pretty bad, so you pretty much only play this as a side grade if you really want it for that support ability, I guess. Here's an Inari. I feel like the tough 2 could be pretty good situationally, but yeah, I don't know. You're getting a pretty even amount of stats for this, and it's not doing anything crazy. This Tinkerbell, it can definitely set up your reserve pretty good, and you get the sabotage both times. I feel like, though, it could be a little bit awkward, and it might not always be a power play, so yeah, just gonna give it like a C+. Yeah, I don't know about this one. The rare charge already can be played twice, and now you're paying like 4 and 3 for double charge. You get like a free resupply and the little 1/0/0 that can get boosted, but it doesn't really seem that much better than a rare, if even. And this Kraken 0/0/6 for 5 is alright, but then you have to play more from the reserve to get the boost. This just seems so fair. Kitsune here, you get 4 draws over the 2 times it's played, and your opponent gets 2. The stats, though, are pretty bad, and if I'm just getting 4 draws out of this, I don't know, that is a lot, and it's really nice, but I don't like to give my opponents any draws. I honestly think a 1-cost 0/1/0 that can push an expedition that's uncontested while also resupplying could be really good. I think a lot of heroes might try this out if it was a rare, so it's probably a little bit better than a rare. Yeah, I'll put it on like the C+ side, but not breaking through to a B yet. I mean, this is basically acapella training, but you get an extra body both times, and it costs 1 more from hand. I don't know, as far as controlling your opponent goes, I feel like this works pretty well. I think this is honestly at least a B-. Being so cheap makes it really flexible and pretty disruptive. This Lady of the Lake here, pretty average from hand, and I don't like when like the best effect on my card only comes the second time it's played from reserve. Gonna give it a C-. This is pretty good. You can give something anchored both times. I definitely think that this is better than a rare card, but yeah, there are a lot of Muna cards that can anchor things more than just once, so yeah, I think that a B is pretty fair for this. You can have it lose fleeting and gain 2 boosts, which is not normally available for the Muna faction. I think that that's pretty good, a 4/5/4 over and over for 3 mana, and then you can also be giving things a sleep and boost, which means you could use it on like your own card to make them bigger or disrupt your opponent. I feel like that's pretty flexible and strong. Here we got another caregiver. So the second time it essentially costs 1, and then when another character joins your expeditions, if you have a landmark, you can give things anchored. While not all the decks run a permanent right now, in the future, if like that becomes more common, this one definitely has a higher ceiling because it could anchor multiple things in a day. So yeah, I think I might even give this an A-. It's probably not quite there yet, but in the future, in the right deck, I think this could really shine. A little expensive, 7 cost, but you could activate your permanence triggers for both permanents or all of the ones you control twice. That's pretty strong, but right now, it's like if you have multiple Hive out, you've already won and anything else isn't that great. I'm sure that this could get better with time, but yeah, for now I think it's definitely just okay. Maybe even this B is a little generous. Kind of similar card. You do have to discard a card from your reserve when you play this, so this does cost one less than the rare already, which is pretty good, but you are using up a lot of resources to use it. Yeah, I don't know. I'm giving this a B again. It's hard to say, like, if the right permanents are made, this could definitely be a B, but for now, it just wouldn't work as well because we have like a pretty limited card pool. 5 costs 5. I think that's pretty nutty, and then from reserve, you'll just discard it to draw a card. Yeah, I think this could be really strong if we have a deck that will consistently run landmarks. I'm going to give this a B+. Here we got a Cloth Dancer. Each character gains fleeting. Put the top card of your deck in the mana zone. From the reserve, it's just a 1/0/3, which is fine for one. From the hand, though, you have so many effects going on. I feel like this has to be good. The stats are kind of abysmal, though. So maybe you're getting 2-0'd the day you play it. Is that worth taking out some of their resources and giving a mana? I don't know. I think it's probably a little bit better than a rare, but it might prove to be too awkward in practice. Pretty good stats for 2 from hand. You can put a card from your hand in reserve to put the top 2 cards of your deck in the mana. This seems pretty unassuming, but in reality, if you're playing the Foundry version of this deck, where you can get the from reserve effect from hand, this could go crazy. You could get 4 mana over the course of 2 days. Yeah, I think this card's pretty good. Gonna give it an A- just because of the condition of having to put a card from your hand in reserve. But there is a card pretty similar to this later that we'll look at that might get an even higher rating. Shenlong here, tough 2. Target character switches expeditions. This is kind of cool because you can pull something onto the same side as this to be able to like block it with all like your massive stats. I don't know. It's fine. It's still going to be hard to win both expeditions, but maybe this is a little better than some rares that exist. It's going to be really easy to get 2-0'd the day you play this. I don't know. It's like an alright effect, but yeah, I don't think I'd ever make space for this card in my deck. This Kodama, it can give a character anchored at dusk, and it'll stay out for 2 days because of its own effect. Also, you just have this extra effect on there in a Venker or something. If you can boost this, you'll be able to discard a permanent. I feel like that's pretty flexible and even strong if you don't get some of those synergies. I'm going to give this an A. Got the normal effect. Added on there, draw a card, possibly a resupply too. Seems pretty good to me. I feel like that if this card existed as a rare, I'd definitely try it out in some heroes. Yeah, I don't know. It's a pretty fair card. I feel like it's around the rare level or maybe even a little better. Here we have a red. If I go to reserve, you can sabotage. It does sabotage. Dust sabotage is pretty weak because the reserve's usually empty, and they'll definitely have a chance to play around it. When you go to the reserve, though, or here, leave the expedition zone, you can put this out into play and then take out a character that they played that turn, which is a pretty cool interaction, but it's not really game-breaking. I'm just going to say this is like a rare level. Haven Bouncer here. You may discard a card from reserve to sabotage. Not a big fan. You each lose a card, pretty even. But you also have the resupply, which can basically 1-for-1 with that, where you just put the card in the reserve and get rid of it. So that kind of nets out now. And then you may put a card from your hand in reserve if you do at game 1 boost. Got a lot of effects here, so you could probably find a way to get some advantage out of them. I think this would be like a pretty alright rare. Here you've got resupply and give something anchored, but you do have to pay a full 3 mana for that, and you get a 1/3/0, which is only going to be good in a couple of regions. I feel like that is pretty strong. You're definitely getting a little bit of extra value between 2 effects that are powerful and a body for 3. But yeah, I don't know. I think the B is pretty fair. Maybe only getting like 1 or 2 mana cheated out of this. Now we have a Kraken, 10 mana. I think this is the highest mana cost in any of the cards in existence right now. 0/0/6, draw 3 cards. I don't know. I think that if I play a 10 cost card, it basically needs to win both expeditions for sure. This is kind of just setting up for the future, but you've probably lost the game if you play this. I don't really ever see a way that this is going to work out for you. I'm going to give it an F. Pretty simple here. We just got sabotage and draw a card. I feel like you could afford to pay 1 extra from reserve to draw a card, and I don't know, this seems fine to me. Nothing crazy, but I feel like it could be at least as good as a rare. This one's like almost good, but the way Altered works right now, anything that costs more than 4 just isn't played. And so most of the time, this is just going to let you send 1 target character to reserve. And even if there were expensive cards that cost more than 4, you're probably not going to play that and something else in a day. So I feel like you're rarely sending 2 things to reserve with this. But if you did, it would be pretty good. So maybe that'll happen in the future. Ysmer Stargazer. I mean, this is just worse than the Mage Dancer because you gain the boost, but you don't have the draw ability. And then if you're playing this to sacrifice it and resupply, 2 cost to put a sacrifice target out there, I don't think that makes up for the benefit of their resupply. Yeah, I'm not super impressed with this one. Seems kind of like a worse version of the common Mage Dancer, honestly. Sneezer Shroom. Up to 1 target character gains a sleep. So from hand, it's like body and a beauty sleep. And it's kind of hard to anchor it from reserve. Yeah, this is a little underwhelming. I'm not that impressed. The reserve cost on this could be pretty good with Festival, getting a 1 cost sleeping character, and then a 3/2/3 from hand that's not asleep, and then you can give something fleeting anchored or asleep. Yeah, this could be pretty good in Festival for sure. And then, I mean, it's stronger than Parvati from hand, so I guess this has to be a little bit better than a rare for sure. And then now we see an Inari for Axiom. Let's see, you may put a card from your hand in reserve to do the triggers when I leave the expedition zone due to triggers. If this was like a 3 cost, I feel like it could be pretty crazy, but at 4, getting the triggers twice, I mean, this is definitely like, I feel like a little above average than a rare. Putting a card from your hand in reserve, though, is kind of essentially an additional cost. I think this would be like a pretty good rare, but I don't know if it's like significantly better than a rare. Here we've got Moon Merchant. If you control 2 or more landmarks, you may return a card from your reserve to your hand. I mean, that could get a trace counter, and then when you play a permanent, you can resupply. Yeah, the stats here I think are a little below rate with the 3 hand cost, and everything's like pretty situational, but if it all lined up perfectly, I mean, it could be all right. So, well, I don't think this would be super great now. Maybe in the future it could like have a place and be like a rare level. Alice, I mean, this is the same total stats as the common, and now you have to pay 1 to give something 1 boost. Yeah, this seems like a straight side grade pretty much from the common. I'm just going to give it a D. Kodama here gets a sleep. The 2/4/4 is maybe better than 3/3/3, but the fact that it gains a sleep from reserve as well is pretty frustrating, and you lose the good support ability for this. Yeah, I think this isn't that impressive. I'm going to say it's like a side grade because a lot of things have changed, but they definitely haven't gotten better, and honestly, maybe they're worse. Foundry Mechanic, if you control 2 more landmarks, target character gains a boost. I mean, this could probably be better than the common in some decks, but I don't know if it's ever really better than the rare, because the rare already essentially gave something a boost even without landmarks just because of the extra stats and has a lower reserve cost. Yeah, I think this is at least on par with the common, and but not much better. Okay, Studious Disciple. Wow, this is pretty hard to set up, but it is super cheap. Like, when you play another character with the basic hit of 0 and this has to have a boost, I don't know if Nevenka plays a ton of cards with 0, but like, theoretically, there is the potential here to do some cool stuff. It's just so unlikely, especially in the current decks, that I don't see this doing anything now. But I mean, in the long run, I feel like this could be at least as good as a rare, or maybe even better if things really line up. Haven Bouncer, having to pay 4 just to get Sabotage is trash. And now if you get 2 more boosted characters, Sabotage, that's going to be pretty late. Your opponent, by the time you have 2 boosted characters, they could have maybe emptied the reserve. I'm not impressed with this one. Actually going to give it all the way down to an F. Hathor, you may put a card from your hand in reserve. If it's a spell, up to 1 target character against fleeting. So you're losing like half a card to make them lose half a card, and the stats on this probably aren't even worth it for the cost. Yeah, not super impressed by this. Gonna give it a D-. I mean, like, maybe there's a chance it could be playable somewhere, so I'm not gonna give it an F, but it's pretty bad. The Hatter made his card target permanent. Well, 4-cost card is already a little rough just because it means you're not making as many plays in your turn. You're going to be done with your actions faster than your opponent, but 4/5/0 for 4 is just a little under par, and then depending on what permanent you discard, this could definitely get value. I feel like this is just going to be as good as the permanents you're using it on. If there's like a bunch of 5+ cost permanents, it would be great. Otherwise, probably not so much. Council here. I mean, this seems great from hand. A 5/4/3 for 3 with the Council's effect is pretty darn good, but it's so bad from reserve. It's really vulnerable to removal and things that I don't think that it's honestly worth running. Probably a kind of below average rare at that point because of the extra cost from the reserve. Isimposhi here. Wow, I mean, the stats are pretty bad. It's just on par from reserve, and from hand, you'd have to pay 1 to get like 2/4/3, but then that's below cost for 3, and then for 2, it's below average in all ways. I'm going to give this an F2. I honestly can't see anywhere I'd run this. Red, 3/2/2. This is basically worse than it is worse than the rare. Yeah, the rare is a 2 cost and a 3 cost that has to have 3 boosts to draw a card. But is it worse than the common as well? It's pretty different, so it's hard to compare. I feel like it's a little bit of a side grade from the common, but just thinking about how the rare isn't even played and that one's a 2 and then a 3 for the mana cost, yeah, I don't know if this would see much play. Keylon Elemental, put a card from your hand in reserve. When you play a permanent, you may discard a card from reserve to resupply. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of this. I feel like the stats aren't that great to have to pay 1 extra mana, and yeah, just kind of weird effects, not doing a ton for me. Probably just play the common. Bravos Vanguard here. You may have target character other than me lose fleeting. When I leave the expedition zone, draw a card. So basically we're trading giving a boost for drawing a card both times. I think that the draw is better, but you do have to pay 1 extra mana one time. Yeah, I don't know. Definitely feels like a side grade. I don't know if I can say it's blatantly worse than a rare, but it's an interesting card. Baba Yaga here can draw a card both times it's played, and summoning a token basically makes up for the extra 1 in cost from hand and reserve. So it's pretty much side grades all around, but you get an extra draw one time as well. But more expensive cards are a little worse than less expensive. Maybe this is slightly better than a rare, but not super significantly. I don't know. Could be a cool card to try out and play. Moonlight Jellyfish. This seems really fun to me. I like the design here. I wish this existed in a different rarity. Like, you can sacrifice it, summon a brass bug. You could then play it again from reserve and get 2 brass bugs for 4 mana. But that's just so average. That's like common level stats. Sacrifice a permanent to draw a card. I don't know. I like the idea. This seems interesting to play, but I don't think I can say it's much stronger than a common for like the result you'll actually get out of it. Foundry Engineer. Next permanent you play costs 1 less, basically twice. So a 1 mana 1/1/2. I mean, that's the same as a lot of your rares from hand, and then from reserve it's essentially a 0 mana 1/1/2. So this has to be at least as good as a rare. Honestly, it's probably a little bit better than a rare because it could be 0 cost sometimes from reserves, but other times it'll cost 2, so maybe that evens out to just being a C. Ozma, you can draw a card just like normal. You're basically having to pay 1 more mana each time to get 2 tokens the first time it's played. That's pretty on par. Maybe in Golrong that could be cool, but honestly, I think that this is basically the same strength as the common and probably a little worse because you have to pay more. When you create a token, robots you control gain 1 boost. Well, we've got Ogun, which is 2 cost with better stats, and it gives everything a boost both times it's played. I think this is a card that it's like really hard to rate because it seems super bad right now. We just don't make enough robots. There aren't enough tokens, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, in the future, I'm sure this could grow exponentially, especially if you play it from the reserve and then you make a ton of robot tokens afterwards. I'm going to give this a C, but I don't know. It's like one of those things that you wouldn't run it at all right now. And in the future, it might get crazy. It's just hard to know. So I think the C is all right, but it could definitely go up if you were actually able to trigger its effect like 2 or 3 times in a day. Cloth Dancer here. Each character gains fleeting. When a character you control gains 1 or more boosts, up to 1 target character with 3 or less other me gains anchored. Whew, baby. I'm gonna give this a B+. I feel like there's some cool effects on here. The 4 hand cost holds us back a ton. If this was 3, this would like blow through the roof. But yeah, I don't know. Still, you're gonna probably be able to anchor like 2 things. One when you play it and get a boost with Tasia, and then like once after if you play like a Thespian or Young Sue or something. But you need a pretty large amount of mana to do that because of the higher hand cost. Yeah, it's a pretty cool card. Maybe the B+ is close to right, but yeah, I don't think it can be much more since it is a little expensive and it's not like self-activating by giving a boost or anything. Ozma here. So basically the rare from hand, but you actually lose some stats from the reserve. You get some extra effects though, giving characters boosts and resupply. I feel like it's definitely a little different from the rare, but I don't know if I can say it's like strictly better because you do have to pay a little bit extra for the extra effects. So yeah, it's in that rare level. Kappa. So you got like reversed version of the common as far as stats go. From the reserve, you pay more to discard a character. If I get a boost, draw a card. It's interesting, but I think it's kind of common power level, and 6 cost from the reserve is pretty high, even though you're doing some extra things. Yeah, I don't see this being very powerful. Tanuki, when you gain boost, you can give things fleeting and you can sabotage, but you do have to control a landmark, so I don't like having a lot of conditions here of like boosts and landmarks. It could be kind of cool to give multiple things fleeting and stuff with this, but it just seems average power level wise. The stats on it aren't super amazing. They're pretty average from hand, and yeah, I don't know. This seems like a cool and interesting card, but it's not like a clear powerhouse on its own. And messing up with your opponent's resources is only good if they don't have a lot of resources, but if they still have plenty of cards to play afterwards, you might as well have done nothing. Here we've got a Trickster. Got a lot of text lines here. You can gain boost, return a spell. So, I mean, the Flamel effect, we already know that that is pretty strong. Roll a die, draw a card, or resupply. I feel like this is like pretty rare level at least, maybe even a little better. I feel like, yeah, I'd definitely run this in something with like Off You Go or something. Yeah, this could be pretty good. Coniferal Cone Man. Okay, you can put a card from your hand in reserve to boost this a lot, maybe like 2 to 4 boosts. So you could have like a 6/6/7 for 4 and then for 5. Putting a card from your hand in reserve is a slight cost though, and you might overfill your reserve, especially in Fen, but you're going to be making a powerful play. I think this is pretty good. It's probably better than a rare. I don't know if I can go too high though, because a lot of removals will trade favorably into this. So while this is like pretty strong and they need to have something to answer it, it could be answered pretty easily. Sandman. From hand, this is basically identical to the rare, but you also get a return a card from your reserve to your hands, and you get that both times. Yeah, I think that this could maybe even be like a B as well or something. I feel like, yeah, the C plus at least, or B, because being able to return things like Off You Go and stuff can be pretty good, but the rare Sandman's a little weak and not really played as is, so maybe the C plus is fine, because this kind of needs to be better than the original Sandman already to be better, like a good rare, or to see play as a rare, but feel pretty fine with that rating. Here we've got the Council. So it's just worse than the rare, because that's going to be a 3/3/3, and now we're losing some stats. Now you can have the option to pay 1 to create an Orders token in each of your expedition, but just the first time it's played. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of this. I think it's definitely better than the common. Going from 4 cost to 3 is huge, even if you lose a lot of stats, because you're mostly playing it for the effect. So, I'd definitely run this as a common, for sure. I'd be like putting this in my warrior deck if it was a common, but yeah, as the unique, it's just not quite doing it for me. Here, this is 5 cost and 6. Gonna be super easy to remove this with like a 3 or 2 cost card. Yeah, you're gonna be really sad about that. But if it stuck around, you could get a lot of tokens, and even the first day, you could play this and have like 1 more mana, drop a trooper or something, summon some tokens. It seems really strong, but the fact that it just pushes its own side, which your opponent already doesn't want to play on because of the Council's effect, it just seems a little win more, and you're adding extra risk in with the high cost. Yeah, I'm not super impressed with this. Honestly, I'd probably even rather play the card on the left and the right, but just by like the fact that you have the potential to summon so many tokens and like put so many stats in one lane. You can do really crazy stuff, but it's just not that good for like competitive or what you want to be doing, where you'd want to put the tokens on the other side and then push both lanes. If that's what it did, this would be a different discussion. Maybe this would even be like a B plus, A minus or something, because you could like essentially set up a 2-0 the next day, but not quite there. Copelia, 1/3/1, so we've got the common stat line. When I go to reserve from the expedition zone, you can play me for free and I get to sleep. So you're going to get this essentially the day it's played, and then 2 days later, you'll have the body again. When I leave the expedition zone, draw a card. So for 3 mana, you'll get a 1/3/1 twice and 2 draws, but one's pretty delayed. If the second Copelia and draw weren't so delayed, this would probably be crazy. You get 2 draws right away and like that many stats. But as is, it's basically like a Baba Yaga from hand that gives you like another free Baba Yaga several days later. I think that has to be better than a rare, but I don't know if it's like crazy powerful, because in a lot of games, if you draw this like late enough, you won't even have time to see the second version of it come out. Yeah, and then the draw especially, like even if you get the 1/3/1 in stats a second time, you might not see that draw because the game could be over. I don't know, probably C plus, B minus range. 230 here. You may put a card from your hand in reserve to sabotage. You may discard a card from your reserve. If you do, give fleeting. So you basically get rid of 1 full card or like 2 half cards of your own to get rid of 2 half cards from your opponent. It's just an even trade, and you have average stats. Since you can pick the cards, maybe that's good. And if you build your deck right to have enough draw, it'll hurt your opponent more than you. But yeah, the actual like math on the paper isn't crazy here. So I think this is just kind of like a rare. Baba Yaga again. 2 costs from hand is nice. Put a card from your hand in reserve to draw both times. So we're losing out on a little bit of stats. And now we have to put a card from our hand in reserve, but we can draw twice. I think, though, if you can pick which card you put in the reserve, it's probably worthwhile. And so, yeah, getting 2 full draws and getting rid of, like, the 2 worst cards in your hand, probably all right. And I don't know. It seems like it'd be an all right rare, especially if you can start to get cards that want to be in the reserves for effects or things. Or, like, if it's a charge that you were only going to be able to play once anyway. I think this could be, like, at least as good as a rare, maybe a little better. Gatekeeper here. Really interesting card. 0/4/1. Okay. When the character you control gains 1 or more boosts, up to 1 target character with hand cost 3 less, other gains anchored. Yeah, this is one of the most popular effects right now for Muna. It is very strong. It even is like a self-triggering from the reserve where it can give things boosts. The only thing really holding this back is it doesn't have a way to boost things from hand. And I don't know. This card is great. I'm going to give it an A. But I have seen ones that are like 3 from hand and 2 from reserve, or that boost something both times. So while this is really good and you'll be able to get a lot of boosts out of this, especially the second time, and a lot of anchors, I think that the A is fine, and there's probably a good amount of cards that could outshine this one by a little bit. Ganesha, 6/6/6 from reserve. You can activate the normal effect. Yeah, I don't know. Playing this as a 6 cost vanilla the first time is holding it back a lot. I'm not super impressed. Ogun here. When you play a permanent, if you control 2 more landmarks, robust control, gain a boost. Yeah, the costing is pretty expensive here, and you don't get the effect unless you play permanents. I think this is worse than the common. It'd be like a pretty specific scenario for it to be able to actually get more value than the common would. Or its attorney can discard permanents with hand cost 4 or more. Well, that's another thing where, like, this is absolutely trash and you'd love to just have the rare every time instead, until the moment where you, like, this is the perfect answer and it's way better. So, I don't know. I think that this is probably normally worse than the rare, but in the perfect meta, it could be really good, and you're probably only running this in a meta where it is good, so I'll give it a C+. All right, that takes us to Zidainte's Haven Trainee. This card, it's pretty similar to one we saw before, but now it says if you control 1 or more landmarks, put the top 2 cards of your deck in the mana zone. The last one we saw, you had to put a card from your hand in the reserve, and I already thought that card was really good. Here, not having to put a card from your hand in reserve, and having the requirement that you need to control a landmark when you're pretty much only playing this in a Foundry deck that you would need their landmark out before you use it anyway. Basically not a cost at all. This card, in my opinion, is super good. It is going to get an S. I feel like this could be one of the best cards in a Foundry Kojo. You could just blow your mana up super fast early on, and then it'll be really hard for your opponent to keep up. I don't know if that deck, though, is super competitive, because if you build around Foundry and you don't draw it, it just brings a lot of variance into your games where you'll have like massive swings in the power level depending on your draw. But if that's the deck you're playing, this is one of the best uniques you can play in it. Yeah, I think this is a great card. Thank you so much for watching. It's been a blast going through all of these. I tried to get it all in 30 minutes or less. It was a sprint, but if you have any more questions or things, definitely bring them up in the comment. We can talk about some of my ratings a little more. Really appreciate you all tuning in. Make sure to leave that like, subscribe to my channel. I have all sorts of content coming in the future. Until next time, I'll catch you later.